Caleb Thornton heard the scream before he saw the child. A sound so raw, so desperate, it cut through the howling Wyoming blizzard like a knife through flesh. When he found them, a 5-year-old girl standing guard over her mother's crumpled body in waist-deep snow, armed with nothing but a stick and a rock, something inside him shattered. The woman wasn't moving. The child was turning blue, and Caleb made a decision that would change everything. Stay until the end to see how 3 broken souls became an unbreakable family. Comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The scream came again. Caleb pulled his horse to a dead stop, his breath freezing in the air. 8 years of silence on this ranch. 8 years of nothing but wind and cattle and his own thoughts for company. He'd forgotten what a human voice sounded like when it was breaking. Easy boy. He patted his gelding's neck, scanning the white wall of snow swirling around him. Easy. The blizzard had come on fast. November in Wyoming territory didn't give warnings. 1 minute the sky was gray, the next minute you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. Caleb had been checking the fence line when the storm hit a stupid decision, but he'd made plenty of those in 40 years of living. The scream tore through the wind a third time. Not an animal. Human. Small. A child. Caleb kicked his horse forward before his brain caught up with his body. The gelding protested, fighting against the driving snow, but Caleb pushed harder. Something in that sound, the terror, the desperation, the sheer stubborn fury of it, wouldn't let him turn back. 50 yards. 100. The world was nothing but white and cold, and that voice calling him forward like a beacon. Then he saw her. A girl. Couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Standing in snow up to her waist, her little body shaking so hard he could see it from 20 feet away. Her hair was plastered to her face with ice. Her lips were blue. Her fingers were wrapped around a stick she was waving like a sword, and behind her, half buried in a snowdrift, was a woman who wasn't moving. Jesus Christ! The words came out as vapor. Caleb dismounted, and the girl's head snapped toward him. Her eyes huge and dark and wild with something between terror and rage locked onto his face. "Stay back!" Her voice cracked like ice breaking. "Don't you touch her! Don't you touch my mama!" Caleb raised both hands, showing her his palms. His heart was hammering. The woman on the ground he could see now that she was breathing, barely, her chest rising and falling in shallow little gasps. But she was gray. Gray like death waiting to happen. "I ain't gonna hurt nobody," Caleb said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Name's Caleb Thornton. I got a ranch about 3 miles from here. I got a warm fire and food and medicine. Looks like your mama could use all 3. "We don't need nothing from you." The girl took a step forward, putting herself more firmly between Caleb and her mother. The stick trembled in her frozen hands. "Mama said don't trust nobody. She said wait here, and she'd wake up and we'd go to California, and everything would be... Her voice broke completely. A sob ripped out of her that seemed too big for her tiny body, but she didn't lower the stick. Caleb felt something crack inside his chest, something he'd spent 8 years building. Walls, defenses, whatever you wanted to call them. This child was tearing through them with nothing but a stick and sheer willpower. "What's your name, kid?" he asked gently. The girl's chin quivered. "Rosie." "Rosie, that's a real pretty name." Caleb took one slow step forward. "Rosie, I can see you're about the bravest girl in all of Wyoming standing guard over your mama like this. But the truth is, she's real sick. And if we don't get her warm soon, all that brave ain't gonna matter. You understand what I'm saying?" Rosie's eyes filled with tears that froze on her cheeks as they fell. "She ain't gonna die. She promised she wouldn't leave me. She promised." "Then let's make sure she keeps that promise." Caleb knelt down in the snow, getting himself on her level. The cold bit through his pants, but he didn't care. He was looking at this child, this fierce, frozen, terrified child who'd probably been standing here for hours, and something shifted in his gut. "I used to be a medic in the war," he said. "Patched up a lot of hurt folks. Some of them a lot worse off than your mama. But I gotta look at her first. Will you let me do that?" Rosie's fingers tightened on the stick. For a long moment, Caleb thought she might actually swing at him. Then slowly she lowered it. "If you hurt her," she whispered, "I'll kill you." Despite everything, the cold, the dying woman, the desperate situation, Caleb felt one corner of his mouth twitch. Fair enough. He moved past the girl carefully, very aware of her eyes tracking his every movement. Up close, he could see the woman had been beautiful once, before exposure and fever had hollowed out her cheeks, before her lips had cracked and bled from the cold. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves spread across the snow like something from a painting. But it was the wound that stopped him cold. Her side. Under her torn dress, half hidden by the fabric, he could see it. A gash deep and angry, the skin around it red with infection, despite the freezing temperatures. Someone had tried to stitch it up, but they'd done a poor job. The wound was festering. In this cold, that should have been impossible. But infection didn't follow rules. Caleb pressed his fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, rapid and weak, her heart fighting to keep her alive. Her skin burned with fever, even as her body shook with cold. "How long she been like this?" he asked. "I don't know." Rosie's voice was small now. The fierceness was draining away, replaced by exhaustion. "We were in the wagon. Then the men came. They took everything. Papa tried to stop them, but they... She couldn't finish. Caleb's jaw tightened. "When did the men leave?" "Morning, I think. The sun was different." Rosie swayed on her feet. "Mama woke up after. She said we had to walk, find a town, find help. But she fell down. She couldn't get back up. I tried to carry her. I tried and tried, but she's too heavy and I ain't strong enough and..." "Hey!" Caleb caught the girl gently by the shoulders as she started to tip forward. "You did good, Rosie. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You stayed with her. You kept watch. That's what saved her life." He eased the woman's head up slightly and pulled his canteen from his belt. The water was half frozen, but he managed to get a few drops onto her cracked lips. She didn't wake, but her throat worked reflexively, swallowing. That was something. That meant she was still fighting. "Is she gonna die?" Rosie asked. Caleb looked at the child's face, at the hope and terror warring in those huge dark eyes. Kids like this who'd already seen too much of the world's ugliness, they could smell a lie from a mile away. "She might," he said honestly. "That infection's bad. She's lost a lot of blood. But I'll tell you something else. She's still breathing, which means she's still fighting. And if she's half as stubborn as her daughter, she's got a hell of a chance." Rosie wiped her nose on her arm, leaving a streak of frozen snot across her face. "What are you gonna do?" "I'm gonna take both of you back to my ranch. Got medicine there, supplies. Everything we need to give your mama a fighting chance." He stood scanning the white wall of snow around them. The storm was getting worse. They had maybe an hour before visibility dropped to nothing. "Can you ride a horse?" Rosie nodded. "Good. You're gonna sit up front with me. I'm gonna carry your mama behind us. She's too heavy. I tried." "I know you did." Caleb was already bending down, sliding his arms under the woman's shoulders and knees. She weighed almost nothing, which was terrifying in its own way. "But I'm a lot bigger than you. We'll manage." Getting them onto the horse was a feat of stubbornness and prayer. Caleb lifted Rosie first, then positioned the woman, Rosie's mama, in front of her, propped against his own chest as he mounted behind them both. The gelding snorted and shifted, unhappy with the unusual load. "Hold on to my coat," Caleb told Rosie. "Don't let go no matter what. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "And keep talking to your mama. Let her know you're here. Sometimes folks can hear things even when they're sleeping like this." Rosie's small hands grabbed fistfuls of his sheepskin coat. Mama, it's me. It's Rosie. This man Caleb, he's helping us. He's got a ranch with a fire and medicine. So you just gotta hang on. Okay, you gotta keep your promise. You promised you wouldn't leave me." Caleb turned the horse toward home and kicked him into a careful walk. Every step was calculated fast enough to matter slow enough not to jostle his unconscious passenger too badly. The woman's head lolled against his shoulder. He could feel the terrifying heat of her fever through both their clothes. 3 miles had never seemed so far. They rode in silence for the first half-mile. The storm howled around them, snow driving into their faces, the cold biting through every layer of clothing. Caleb kept his eyes fixed ahead, following landmarks he knew by heart. A split boulder, a dead cottonwood, the creek bed that ran dry in summer, but would be buried under 3 feet of snow by now. "Mr. Caleb." Rosie's voice was barely audible over the wind. "Just Caleb, kid." "Caleb," she paused. "Is your ranch nice?" He thought about his small cabin with its patched roof and drafty windows, the barn that needed a new door, the fence lines that always seemed to need mending no matter how much work he put into them. "It's solid," he said. "Got 4 walls and a roof that don't leak much. Got a stove that puts out good heat and a well that never freezes. It ain't fancy, but it's home." "Do you have a wife?" "No." "Kids?" "No." "Why not?" Caleb's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "That's a complicated question for a little girl to be asking. Mama says I ask too many questions." "Your mama sounds like a smart woman." "She is. She's the smartest person in the whole world. She used to be a teacher, you know, before she married Papa. She can read Latin, and she knows all about plants and healing. She's the one who stitched herself up after the bad men hurt her." Caleb's stomach turned. A woman injured and bleeding, trying to stitch her own wound while protecting her child from God knew what. The rage that flared in his chest surprised him with its intensity. "Tell me about your papa," he said, partly to keep the girl talking and awake, partly because he needed to know what kind of situation he was stepping into. Rosie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat in the way children's voices get when they're trying not to feel something too big for them. "Papa died. The bad men shot him. He was trying to protect us and they shot him and he fell down and Mama screamed and I screamed and then they— You don't have to tell me," Caleb said quickly. "They wanted to take Mama. One of them said she was too pretty to leave behind." Rosie's small body shuddered against his chest. "But Mama grabbed me and ran. She ran so fast even though she was bleeding. She ran until she couldn't run no more. Then we walked. Then she fell down. Then the snow started." Caleb let the silence stretch, giving her space to feel whatever she needed to feel. "What was your papa's name?" he asked finally. "Thomas. Thomas Sullivan. He was going to build us a house in California, with a garden and a swing and a room just for me." Rosie's voice cracked. "He promised." "I'm sorry, Rosie." "Mama cried a lot. She tried to hide it, but I heard her at night. Every night since Papa went to heaven." Rosie paused. "Do you think he's watching us right now from heaven?" Caleb thought about all the men he'd watched die in the war. About Eleanor and the baby buried on the hill behind his cabin. About whether heaven existed at all, or if it was just a story people told themselves to make the dying easier. "I think," he said carefully, "that folks who love us don't ever really leave. They stay right here." He touched his chest. "In here. And they watch over us best they can." "That's what Mama says too." "Then it must be true." The ranch came into view as the last light faded from the sky. A small cluster of buildings huddled against the landscape, almost invisible in the driving snow. But Caleb could make out the shape of his cabin, the barn behind it, the corral where his other horses would be waiting. Home. "Almost there," he said mostly to himself. Rosie had gone quiet and still against him, but her grip on his coat hadn't loosened. The kid had backbone. Most children her age would have been hysterical hours ago. He guided the horse to the cabin door and dismounted carefully, easing the woman down with him. She was completely limp now, her breathing shallow and irregular. Not good. Not good at all. Rosie hopped down and pushed that door open for me. The girl slid from the saddle and ran to the door, struggling with the heavy latch until it swung inward. Caleb carried the woman inside and laid her on his bed, the only bed in the cabin. It wasn't much, just a simple frame with a cornhusk mattress, but it was clean. "Light the lamp on that table," he told Rosie, already moving to the stove. He needed to get the fire blazing, needed hot water, needed his medical kit from the war. "Then bring it over here so I can see what I'm working with." The next hour was a blur of activity. Caleb stripped away the woman's frozen clothes as carefully as he could, very aware of Rosie watching from the corner. He kept his touch clinical, professional, the same way he'd treated wounded soldiers on the battlefield. No room for anything but the work. The wound on her side was worse than he'd thought. Deep. Infected. The stitches she'd done herself were already pulling apart the flesh around them, angry and swollen. Red lines spread from the wound like spider legs, blood poisoning creeping through her system. He cleaned it first with whiskey, and she moaned even in unconsciousness, her body trying to twist away from the pain. Then he heated his knife blade in the stove flame and did what he had to do, cut away the dead tissue, clean out the infection, stitch her back together properly. She screamed. Even unconscious, she screamed. Rosie burst into tears, but didn't run, didn't look away. She grabbed her mother's hand and held on tight. "Mama, Mama, it's okay, Caleb's helping you. He's making you better." "Keep talking to her," Caleb ordered through gritted teeth. "Let her know you're here." "Oh, Mama, you gotta wake up. You gotta keep your promise. You promised you wouldn't leave me, Mama. You promised." The stitching took 20 minutes. By the time Caleb tied off the last one, his hands were shaking and sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. He wrapped the wound in clean bandages, then turned his attention to the fever. That was the real killer now. The infection spreading through her blood, burning her from the inside. He packed her in cool cloths and forced water down her throat a few drops at a time. He crushed willow bark and made her swallow it. He did everything he'd learned in 4 years of war and 8 years of solitude. And then he waited. Rosie had crawled up onto the bed beside her mother, her small body curled against the woman's side. She was asleep now. True sleep, the deep unconscious kind that came from complete exhaustion. Caleb pulled a chair up beside the bed and sat there watching them both. The fire crackled in the stove. The wind howled outside. Inside, 2 strangers slept in his bed while he counted pulse beats and breaths. Around midnight, the woman began to stir. "No." Her voice was thick, slurred. "Don't. Please don't. Rosie, where's Rosie?" "Mama." Rosie jerked awake instantly. "Mama, I'm here." "Stay away from her." The woman's eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. "Don't you dare touch her. Don't you—" "Ma'am." Caleb moved to the bedside, keeping his voice calm. "Ma'am, you're safe. Your daughter's safe. You're at my ranch. Nobody's gonna hurt either of you." But the woman was beyond hearing. She tried to sit up, crying out, when the movement pulled at her stitches. Her hand shot out and grabbed Rosie, pulling the girl against her with what little strength she had. "Mama, it's okay." Rosie was crying now. "We're safe. Mama, Caleb saved us. He found us in the snow and brought us here and made you better." Something in Rosie's voice got through. The woman's wild eyes focused on her daughter's face. Recognition flickered. Relief. "Rosie, I'm here, Mama. I'm right here. I told you to run, to find help. I couldn't leave you, Mama. I couldn't." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My brave girl. My brave, brave girl." Then her gaze shifted to Caleb, and every bit of that brief softness vanished. Her expression went hard, suspicious, afraid. "Who are you? Where am I? What did you—" My name's Caleb Thornton, he said, holding up both hands so she could see them. You're at my ranch about 3 miles from where I found you. Your daughter was standing guard over you in the middle of a blizzard. I brought you both here and patched up that wound on your side. That's all, nothing more. The woman's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the fire, the medical supplies, the clean bandages wrapped around her midsection. Then her gaze dropped to Rosie, who was clean and wearing one of Caleb's old shirts like a nightgown. You changed my daughter's clothes. She was frozen solid. Couldn't leave her in wet things or she'd catch her death. And me, you undressed. Only as much as necessary to treat your wound. Caleb kept his voice steady. Your daughter was right here the whole time. I ain't done nothing improper, ma'am. You got my word on that. She stared at him for a long moment. He could see the war playing out behind her eyes, wanting to believe him, not daring to. Whatever those men had done to her, whatever she'd been through, it had taught her not to trust. Fair enough. He'd earned trust from warier creatures than this. What do you want? She asked finally. Nothing. Everyone wants something. Maybe so, but right now all I want is for you to rest and heal. You damn near died out there, ma'am. That wound was infected bad. Fever's still burning. You're gonna need time to recover. And then what? You'll just let us go. Let you. Caleb almost laughed. Ma'am, you ain't prisoners. Soon as you're strong enough to travel, you're free to go wherever you want. I'll even give you a horse and supplies to get there. But right now, you can barely sit up without turning gray. So maybe we table this discussion until you're not at death's door. Fair. The woman's jaw tightened, but some of the fear in her eyes was fading, replaced by something that might have been confusion or hope. Mama? Rosie whispered, tugging at her mother's hand. Caleb's nice. He saved us. He made me hot food and let me wear his shirt, and he didn't yell even when I asked too many questions. The ghost of a smile flickered across the woman's cracked lips. You always ask too many questions, baby. That's what Caleb said too. He said you were smart for knowing that. The woman looked at Caleb again. This time her expression was softer. Not trusting, not yet, but not hostile either. Clara, she said quietly. My name is Clara May Sullivan. Nice to meet you, Ms. Sullivan, though I wish it was under better circumstances. How long was I unconscious? Found you around midday. It's past midnight now. You woke up a few times, but you weren't really there. Fever talking mostly. Clara closed her eyes, and Caleb could see the weight of everything pressing down on her. Her husband dead. Her daughter nearly frozen. Her own body broken and burning. She was holding on by sheer force of will. You should sleep, he said. Real sleep. Your body needs it. I can't. If they followed us, nobody followed you through that storm. And even if they did, they ain't getting past me. Caleb gestured to the rifle leaning against the wall by the door. I've been sleeping with one eye open for 8 years, ma'am. Ain't nothing gonna happen to you or your daughter while you're under my roof. You got my word. Clara's eyes met his. Something passed between them, an understanding maybe. One survivor recognizing another. Why are you helping us? She whispered. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Eleanor, about the baby he'd never held, about coming home to find 2 graves instead of a family. Because someone should have helped them, he said finally. And nobody did. Clara didn't ask who them was. Maybe she saw the answer in his face. Maybe she understood that some wounds didn't need explaining. She nodded once slowly. Then her eyes drifted closed, and within moments her breathing had evened out into true sleep. Rosie was still awake, watching Caleb with those huge dark eyes. You're sad, she said softly. Like Mama. Like you lost someone too. Get some sleep, kid. Did you lose someone? Caleb looked at this child who'd been through more in one day than most people faced in a lifetime, Who'd watched her father die, and nearly watched her mother die, and still had room in her heart to notice someone else's pain? Yeah, he admitted. A long time ago. Rosie considered this. Then she reached out and patted his hand the way a much older person might comfort a child. Maybe we can be sad together, she said. Mama says sad is easier when you're not alone. Then she curled up against her mother's side and closed her eyes. Caleb sat in his chair and watched them sleep, these two strangers who'd appeared out of a blizzard and turned his quiet world upside down. The fire crackled. The wind howled. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside his cabin, for the first time in 8 years, Caleb Thornton didn't feel alone. The fever broke on the third day. Caleb was outside splitting wood when he heard Rosie's voice ring out from the cabin, high and bright, and nothing like the scared whisper he'd grown used to. Mama, Mama, you're awake. Really awake. He dropped the axe and ran. Clara was sitting up in bed, her face pale but her eyes clear. Rosie had thrown herself across her mother's lap and was crying, the good kind of crying, the kind that came from relief so big it had to escape somehow. Easy, easy. Clara's voice was hoarse but steady. Her hand stroked Rosie's hair with the automatic gentleness of a mother who'd done it 1,000 times. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. You slept so long, Mama. 3 whole days. Caleb said the fever was burning you up inside, and I was so scared you wouldn't wake up, and I prayed and prayed and... I heard you. Clara's eyes glistened. I heard you praying, Rosie. I heard you singing to me. That's what brought me back. Caleb stood in the doorway, uncertain. This felt like a moment he shouldn't be part of. A family moment. Something private and precious. But then Clara looked up and saw him, and something in her expression shifted. Mr. Thornton? Ma'am. Rosie tells me you've been taking care of us for 3 days. Feeding us, nursing me, sleeping on the floor while we took your bed. It ain't nothing. It's everything. Clara's voice cracked. You saved our lives, both of us. I don't know how to... You can thank me by getting stronger. Caleb pushed off the doorframe, suddenly uncomfortable with the emotion in her eyes. I'll make some broth. You need to eat. He retreated to the stove before she could say anything else. Behind him he heard Rosie chattering away, filling her mother in on everything that had happened while she was unconscious. And Caleb let me feed the chickens, Mama. There's 6 of them, and they all have names. Pepper is the mean one, but she lays the best eggs. And there's a horse named Scout who lets me pet his nose. And Caleb taught me how to make coffee, even though he says I'm too young to drink it. But he let me have a little sip, and it was real bitter. But I didn't make a face because I'm brave. Like you said. Rosie. Clara's voice was soft but amused. Breathe, baby. Sorry, Mama. I just missed talking to you. I missed you too. Caleb focused on the broth, stirring it longer than necessary. The warmth of their reunion filled the small cabin in a way he wasn't prepared for. It had been so long since there'd been warmth in this place. Real warmth. The kind that came from people instead of fire. He brought the broth to Clara and watched her drink it slowly, her hands trembling from weakness. Rosie had climbed onto the bed beside her, refusing to be more than arm's length away. How do you feel? Caleb asked. Like I got trampled by a horse and dragged behind a wagon. Clara managed a weak smile. But I'm alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to her, mostly. Caleb nodded at Rosie. I just did the easy part. She's the one who kept you alive in that storm. She told me, standing guard with a stick. Clara's eyes welled up again. My brave girl. Mama, don't cry. You said crying makes your head hurt. These are happy tears, baby, the good kind. Caleb turned away, giving them privacy. He busied himself with chores, stoking the fire, checking the supplies, anything to keep his hands occupied and his eyes elsewhere. But the cabin was small, and Clara's voice carried. Tell me about him, he heard her whisper to Rosie. Tell me everything. He's nice, Mama. Real nice. He talks quiet, and he doesn't yell even when I break things. And he has sad eyes like you. Like he lost someone too. Did he tell you that? Not really, but I can tell. Can't you? A long pause, then Clara's voice even softer. Yes, I can tell. Caleb's hands stilled on the firewood. He felt exposed in a way he hadn't felt in years. Seen. By a 5-year-old, no less. And now by her mother, whose eyes he could feel on his back, even across the room. Mr. Thornton. He turned. Clara was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Not fear, not exactly, but not trust either. Something in between. I need to ask you something. Ask? Why didn't you take Rosie to town? There must be a town nearby. People who could have cared for her while I... She swallowed hard. You could have just taken her somewhere safe and left me. Plenty of men would have. Caleb met her eyes. Plenty of men ain't worth the dirt on their boots. That's not an answer. It's the only one I got. He crossed to the chair by the bed and sat down heavily. You want me to explain why I didn't leave a dying woman and her child to freeze in a blizzard? I can't. It ain't something that needs explaining. It's just something you do. Not everyone does. Then everyone else is wrong. Clara studied him for a long moment. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it because some of the tension left her shoulders. Rosie trusts you, she said quietly. She doesn't trust easily, not anymore, not after... Her voice caught. Not after everything. She's got good instincts. She does. Clara's hand found Rosie's and squeezed. She's the smartest person I know. Mama? Rosie giggled. I'm just a kid. You're my kid. That makes you smart by default. The easy affection between them tugged at something in Caleb's chest. He remembered this. This casual intimacy of family. The inside jokes and gentle teasing. He'd had it once with Eleanor. Before. He stood abruptly. You should rest. Fever's gone, but you're still weak. I'll be outside if you need anything. Caleb. He paused at the door. Thank you, Clara said. For everything. For being one of the good ones. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped out into the cold. The days settled into a rhythm. Clara slept a lot at first, her body rebuilding what the fever had burned away. But each day, she was stronger. By the 5th day, she could stand with support. By the 7th, she was taking shuffling steps around the cabin. Rosie appointed herself as her mother's personal nurse, fetching water and adjusting blankets, and generally making herself indispensable. But she also found time to follow Caleb around like a shadow asking questions about everything. Why do chickens have different colored eggs? What's that plant called? How come Scout likes apples but not carrots? Did you build this cabin yourself? What happened to your wife? That last one stopped him cold. They were in the barn, Rosie helping him fork hay into the horse stalls. She asked it the same way she asked everything else. Casual curious. No sense that she was stepping into dangerous territory. What makes you think I had a wife? There's a dress in the trunk in the corner. It's real pretty. Blue with little flowers. But you never talk about anyone wearing it. Kids saw everything. Caleb had forgotten that. Her name was Eleanor, he said finally. She died 8 years ago. Like Papa. Different. She got sick. A fever like your mama had. Only the doctor came too late and... He stopped. She passed. Did you have any kids? Almost. The baby. His throat closed up. He'd never talked about this. Not to anyone. The baby didn't make it either. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then she walked over and leaned against his leg, her small hand patting his knee. I'm sorry, Caleb. That's real sad. It was a long time ago. Mama says time doesn't make sad go away. It just makes it quieter. Like how the snow muffles everything outside. The sad is still there. It's just softer. Caleb looked down at this child who'd lost her father less than 2 weeks ago and was already trying to comfort him. Something cracked in his chest. Your mama's pretty smart. I told you, smartest person in the world. He ruffled her hair and she grinned up at him, and for just a moment the hole in his chest felt a little smaller. That evening, Clara was sitting up in bed when he came in from chores. She had one of his books open on her lap, a worn copy of poetry he'd bought years ago and never read. You like Whitman? She asked, surprised. Eleanor liked Whitman. I just kept the book. Ah, Clara closed it gently. She had good taste. In books, maybe. In husbands, I ain't so sure. The words came out before he could stop them. Clara's expression flickered surprise, then something softer. Rosie told me about your wife, about the baby. She set the book aside. I'm sorry. I know that word doesn't help much, but it helps more than silence. Clara nodded slowly. After Thomas died, people didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Crossed the street to avoid me. Like grief was something catching. That why you were heading to California to get away from it? Partly. Partly because there was nothing left for us in Ohio. Thomas had debts. I didn't know how bad until after. She twisted her hands in her lap. His father, Thomas's father, is a wealthy man. Railroads. He disowned Thomas when we married. Said I wasn't good enough for the Sullivan name. That's hogwash. Maybe. But rich men don't need good reasons. They just need money and lawyers. Clara's voice hardened. After Thomas died, I wrote to him, Percival Sullivan, asked if he might help his granddaughter at least, even if he wanted nothing to do with me. What did he say? Nothing. No response at all. So I sold everything, bought a wagon, started west. She laughed bitterly. Look how that turned out. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You got family in California. Someone who's expecting you. My sister, Catherine. She's a widow too. 4 children of her own. Clara shrugged. It won't be easy, 2 widows and 5 children under one roof, but it's somewhere. It's a start. That's a long way to travel. Hard country between here and there. I know. Clara met his eyes. But staying put never got anyone anywhere. There was steel in her voice. The same steel he'd heard in Rosie's that first day in the blizzard. Mother and daughter cut from the same cloth. When you're strong enough, Caleb said carefully, I'll take you as far as Salt Lake City. There's regular stage service from there to California, safer than traveling alone. Clara blinked. You'd do that? Said I would, didn't. I said I'd give you a horse and supplies. This is just taking it a step further. That's weeks of travel. In winter, you'd leave your ranch, your animals. Got neighbors who can check on things. Done it before. He stood suddenly restless. Anyway, ain't something to decide tonight. You need more rest. Another week at least before you're fit for any kind of journey. Caleb? He paused. Why are you doing all this? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. The truth this time. Not just, it's something you do. The real reason. He stood there, back to her hand on the doorframe. The question hung in the air between them. I told you about Eleanor, he said finally. What I didn't tell you was that I wasn't here when it happened. I was 2 days' ride away checking cattle. When I got back, she was already buried, her and the baby both. My neighbor's wife had done what she could, but... His voice caught. There was no one there to help her. When she needed it most, I wasn't there. That wasn't your fault. Doesn't matter. She died calling for me, and I wasn't there. He heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. So, when I saw you in that snow, he continued, saw your daughter trying to keep you alive with nothing but a stick and stubbornness, I couldn't ride past. I couldn't be the man who wasn't there. Not again. Silence, long and heavy. Then the rustle of blankets and soft footsteps. Clara appeared beside him. She was weak, still swaying slightly, but her eyes were fierce. "You're not that man," she said quietly. "You never were. Whatever happened with Eleanor, it wasn't a choice. But this was a choice. You chose to stop. You chose to help. You chose to be here. Clara, I spent 2 weeks believing I'd never trust another man again." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cool against his cheek. "I was wrong." Caleb stood frozen. Her touch was light, barely there, but it burned through him like the fever he'd fought to save her from. "You shouldn't." "I know." She dropped her hand. "I know it's too soon. I know I'm still grieving and you're still wounded, and nothing about this makes sense. But I wanted you to know. Whatever happens next, whatever I decide to do, you saved more than my life. Caleb Thornton. You saved my ability to believe in people again. That matters." She turned and walked back to the bed, moving slowly but steadily. Caleb watched her go, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. The third week brought trouble. Rosie had been helping Caleb in the barn when they heard the hoofbeats. Multiple horses approaching fast from the south. Caleb's hand went to his rifle before he even processed the thought. "Rosie, go inside. Tell your mama to stay quiet and away from the windows." "But now, Rosie." The girl ran. Caleb positioned himself behind the barn door, rifle ready, watching the riders approach. 3 of them pushing hard. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then the lead rider came into view, and Caleb let out a breath. Zeke Harper, his neighbor from 12 miles east. A good man with a wife and 5 children and no reason to be riding this hard in the middle of winter. "Caleb?" Zeke pulled his horse to a sliding stop, snow spraying everywhere. "We got trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that wears fancy suits and asks too many questions." Zeke dismounted, his face grim. "There's a man in town. Came up from Cheyenne 3 days ago. Says he's a lawyer representing some rich family back east. He's asking about a woman and a child, a widow, and her daughter traveling alone." Caleb's blood went cold. "What's he saying about them?" "Says the child is heir to a fortune. Says the mother kidnapped her. Says there's a court order giving him custody until the estate matters get settled." Zeke spat in the snow. "Whole town's talking about it. He's put up notices everywhere. Even offered a reward for information. The mother didn't kidnap anyone. That's her own daughter." "I figured, but this lawyer, Ashworth his name is, he's got papers and money and a real convincing story." Zeke's eyes were troubled. "Martha heard some of the women talking. Someone mentioned seeing fresh tracks heading toward your place during that big storm." "Who?" "Don't know. But Ashworth was asking about you specifically this morning. Asking if you lived alone. Asking if you'd had any visitors lately." Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. Behind him, he heard the cabin door open. "Caleb." Clara's voice sharp with worry. "What's happening?" "Go back inside." But she was already walking toward them, Rosie's hand in hers. Her face went white when she saw the riders. "They found us." "Who found you?" Zeke asked. Clara didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on Caleb, wide with fear he hadn't seen since that first night in the cabin. "Thomas's family," she said. "They found us." Zeke looked between them, then at Rosie, understanding dawning on his face. "This is the widow, the one the lawyer's looking for." "Zeke." "I ain't saying anything." Zeke held up his hands. "You know me better than that, Caleb. I just came to warn you. But you need to know what you're dealing with. This Ashworth fellow, he ain't leaving until he gets what he came for. And if someone in town points him this direction..." "How long?" "A day, maybe 2. Depends on how fast the gossip travels." Clara made a sound in her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. Rosie pressed closer to her side. "Mama, are the bad men coming back?" "No, baby. Different men." Clara's voice was barely steady. "But maybe just as bad." We can run, Caleb said. Pack up tonight, head north. I know trails nobody else uses. We could... Run where? Clara's voice cracked. They found me here, Caleb, in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. If I run, they'll just keep following. They'll chase us to California. They'll chase us anywhere. Then we don't run. We fight. Fight how they have money. They have lawyers. They have the law on their side. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. They're going to take my daughter. They're going to take Rosie, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. Mama, no. Rosie wrapped her arms around Clara's waist. I won't go, I won't. I'll run away and come back to you, I promise. Rosie, baby. No, you can't make me. I'll... Caleb stepped forward and dropped to one knee in front of the sobbing child. Hey, look at me. Rosie's tear-streaked face turned toward him. Nobody's taking you anywhere, he said firmly. Not while I'm breathing, you hear me? But the bad men, ain't no bad men gonna get past me. I made you a promise, remember, said I'd keep you and your mama safe, and I don't break my promises. He looked up at Clara, whose expression was torn between hope and despair. There's a judge in Lander, he said. Henry Whitfield. I know him. He's honest, fair. If we go to him first, tell him the truth before this Ashworth fellow can poison the well, we got a chance. And if he sides with them, then we run. But we don't go down without a fight. Caleb stood. Zeke, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Go back to town. Find out everything you can about this lawyer. Where he's staying, who he's talking to, what his next move is. But be careful. Don't let him know you're connected to me. Zeke nodded. I'll send word as soon as I know something. He swung back onto his horse. And Caleb, whatever you're planning, do it fast. Time ain't on your side. He rode away, the other two men following. Caleb watched them disappear into the white landscape, his mind already racing through possibilities. Caleb. Clara's voice was small, broken. I can't lose her. She's all I have left. She's everything. You ain't gonna lose her. You can't know that. He turned to face her. The woman who'd appeared in his life out of a blizzard. Who'd challenged every wall he'd built around himself. Who'd made him feel things he'd sworn never to feel again. I know this, he said. I know I've spent 8 years being alone, being safe, being dead inside, and then you and Rosie showed up and something changed. Something woke up. He took a step toward her. I ain't going back to sleep, Clara. Not for lawyers, not for rich men, not for anything. Why? The word was barely a whisper. Why do you care so much? Caleb stood there in the cold, looking at this woman who'd been through hell and was still standing. Who'd protected her daughter against impossible odds. Who'd somehow found a way past every defense he had. Because you're worth fighting for, he said. Both of you. Clara's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these weren't tears of fear. What do we do now? She asked. Caleb looked at Rosie, who was watching him with those huge, trusting eyes, then back at Clara. Now we make a plan, and tomorrow we go to war. That night, after Rosie had fallen asleep, Clara and Caleb sat at the table in the lamplight, talking in low voices, planning, strategizing. Tell me everything about Thomas's family, Caleb said. Everything you know. Clara's face was pale but determined. Percival Sullivan is Thomas's father. Railroad money, one of the biggest fortunes in Boston. He had 2 sons. Thomas was the younger one. The older one, William, died in the war. No children. So Thomas became the heir. Until he married me. Clara's voice was bitter. Percival gave him a choice, me or the money. Thomas chose me. He was a good man. He was the best man I've ever known. A tear slipped down her cheek. We had nothing, less than nothing most years. But we were happy. We had Rosie. We had each other. What happened when he died? Percival still didn't contact us. Nothing. Not a word of condolence, not an offer of help. I assumed he'd written us off completely. Clara's hands clenched on the table. But now I understand. He wasn't ignoring us. He was making plans. Plans to take Rosie. She's his only living grandchild, his only heir. William's dead. Thomas is dead. If Percival dies without an heir, everything goes to Rosie. Exactly, and if he controls Rosie, he controls the inheritance. Clara's voice shook with fury. He doesn't want her because he loves her. He wants her because she's useful. She's a commodity, a piece of property to be managed. Caleb's jaw tightened. What about you? What happens to you if he takes her? Nothing good. He'll claim I'm unfit, unstable, maybe dangerous. He'll make sure I never see her again. Clara's composure finally cracked. And she'll grow up in that cold, loveless house surrounded by servants who don't care about her, and a grandfather who only sees her as a means to an end. She'll become exactly what they want her to be. And my Rosie, my fierce, brave, beautiful Rosie, will disappear. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. That ain't gonna happen. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. He squeezed her hand. Listen to me, Clara. I've fought in a war. I've faced down men trying to kill me. I've survived things that should have broken me. And I'm telling you now, I ain't letting anyone take that child. Not while there's breath in my body. Clara searched his face. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't wait for them to come to us. Tomorrow morning we ride to Lander. We go straight to Judge Whitfield. We tell him everything, the truth, all of it. The attack on the trail, Thomas's murder, how you nearly died, everything. And if the judge has already been bought, then at least we'll know where we stand. But Whitfield's a fair man. He owes me a favor from years back. If anyone in this territory will listen to reason, it's him. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, we go to the judge. She met his eyes. But Caleb, if this doesn't work, if they come for Rosie anyway, then we disappear. Canada, Mexico, somewhere they can't follow. I know this land better than any lawyer from Boston. They'll never find us. You'd give up everything, your ranch, your life here. Caleb looked around the cabin, at the walls he'd built with his own hands, the stove he'd hauled 50 miles, Eleanor's dress in the trunk in the corner. There ain't nothing here worth keeping, he said quietly. Not without someone to share it with. Clara's breath caught. For a moment neither of them moved. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the walls. Then Clara leaned across the table and pressed her lips to his. It was brief, barely a moment. But when she pulled back, something had changed between them. Something that couldn't be unnamed. Whatever happens tomorrow, she whispered, thank you. For believing in us. For fighting for us. Always, Caleb said. And he meant it. They left before dawn. Rosie was bundled between them on the wagon seat, her small body warm against Caleb's side. Clara sat rigid on the other side, her face pale in the gray morning light. None of them had slept much. Papa used to say the early bird gets the worm. Rosie said, breaking the heavy silence. But I don't like worms. They're squishy. It's just an expression, baby, Clara murmured. I know, but it's a bad one. Who wants worms for breakfast? Caleb felt his mouth twitch despite the tension knotting his shoulders. She's got a point. Don't encourage her. Too late. I'm encouraged. Rosie grinned up at him. Caleb likes my jokes, Mama. He says I'm funny. I said you talk a lot. That ain't the same thing. You laughed when I told you about Pepper chasing the cat. That means I'm funny. Clara reached across and smoothed Rosie's hair. You're something, all right. They rode in silence for a while after that. The road to Lander stretched ahead of them, 18 miles of frozen ruts and treacherous ice. Caleb kept his eyes moving, scanning the horizon for any sign of riders. Nothing yet. But that didn't mean nothing was coming. Caleb, Rosie's voice had gone small. "What's going to happen when we get to town? We're going to talk to a judge, tell him the truth about what happened to you and your mama. Will he believe us?" Caleb thought about all the lies money could buy, all the truth it could bury. "I reckon he will. Judge Whitfield's a good man." "What if he isn't? What if he's like the bad men who hurt Papa?" Clara made a choked sound. Caleb reached down and squeezed Rosie's shoulder. "Then we'll figure something else out. But no matter what happens, you're staying with your mama. You hear me? Nobody's taking you anywhere. Promise. Promise." Rosie nodded solemnly. Then she leaned her head against his arm and closed her eyes. They reached Lander just past noon. The town was busier than Caleb had ever seen it. Wagons crowded the main street. People clustered in groups, voices carrying on the cold air. Something was happening. Something that had the whole place stirred up like a hornet's nest. "Stay close," Caleb murmured to Clara. "Don't talk to anyone unless you have to. I know how to be invisible. That's what worries me." He guided the wagon toward the courthouse, aware of the eyes following them. Strangers in a small town always drew attention. But this felt different. This felt like people were looking for something specific, looking for someone. "Caleb," Clara's voice was tight. "Those notices on the post office." He saw them. 3 of them tacked to the wooden boards outside the building. Even from a distance, he could make out the bold lettering at the top, "Reward." "Don't look," he said. "Keep your head down." "There's a picture. Caleb, there's a picture of me." "I said don't look." But it was too late. Clara had gone white as snow, her hands trembling in her lap. Rosie stirred against Caleb's side. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing, baby. Just tired." "You don't look tired. You look scared." "Rosie! It's the bad men, isn't it? The ones looking for us." Clara couldn't answer. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop behind the courthouse out of sight of the main street. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Both of you. Whatever happens in there, you let me do the talking. Clara, if the judge asks you questions, answer short and honest. Don't elaborate. Don't defend yourself more than you need to. And if he's already been bought, then we walk out and we don't look back." Clara nodded, her jaw tight. Rosie grabbed Caleb's hand. "I'm scared." "I know, kid. It's okay to be scared. Being brave don't mean you ain't afraid. It means you're afraid and you do it anyway." "Like Mama in the desert." "Exactly like that." They climbed down from the wagon. Caleb helped Clara first, then swung Rosie down and set her on her feet. She immediately grabbed both their hands, forming a chain that couldn't be broken. "Together," she said firmly. "Together," Caleb agreed. They walked around to the front of the courthouse. The building loomed above them, 2 stories of whitewashed adobe. Caleb had been here before years ago, testifying in a land dispute. The memory felt like it belonged to a different man. He pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The lobby was empty except for a clerk dozing at a desk. But the moment they entered, a voice rang out from the staircase. "Mrs. Sullivan, at last." Caleb's hand went to his rifle. The man descending the stairs was tall and lean, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that cost more than most people in Lander made in a year. His face was carved from marble, all sharp angles and no warmth. Victor Ashworth. Had to be. "I've been searching for you," Ashworth continued, his voice smooth as oil. "You've led me on quite a chase, but then that's what guilty people do, isn't it? They run." "I ain't run from anything," Clara said, her voice steadier than Caleb expected. "I've been recovering from nearly dying." "Ah, yes, the mysterious attack in the desert." Ashworth's eyes flickered to Caleb. "And this must be the rancher who's been hiding you. Mr. Thornton, isn't it? I've heard interesting things about you." "I ain't hiding nobody, just helping folks in need." "How noble." The word dripped with contempt. "Unfortunately, helping folks in need becomes a crime when those folks are fugitives from justice. She ain't a fugitive? The court disagrees. Ashworth pulled papers from his jacket pocket. I have here a custody order signed by Judge Whitfield this very morning. Temporary guardianship of the minor child, Tessa Rose Sullivan, has been granted to me pending resolution of estate matters. Clara made a sound like she'd been punched. No. I'm afraid so. The judge reviewed my petition and supporting documentation. He agreed that a woman of questionable character with no stable home or income, who's been living in isolation with a man to whom she has no legal connection, is hardly fit to raise a child who stands to inherit a considerable fortune. That's a lie, all of it. Is it? Can you prove you're not living with Mr. Thornton? Can you prove you have any means of supporting yourself or your daughter? Can you prove you didn't deliberately keep the child from her rightful family in order to control her inheritance? I didn't even know about any inheritance. So you say. But the law requires proof, Mrs. Sullivan, and you have none. Rosie pressed closer to Clara's side. Mama, what's happening? Ashworth's cold eyes dropped to the child. Hello, Tessa. I'm Mr. Ashworth. I'm here to take you to your grandfather in Boston. He's very eager to meet you. I don't want to go to Boston. What you want is irrelevant, I'm afraid. The law is quite clear. No. Rosie's voice shook, but she didn't back down. I won't go. You can't make me. I assure you I can. Ashworth gestured to the door. I have deputies waiting outside. They'll escort you to the train station. You'll be in Boston within the week. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Ashworth and the child. That ain't happening. Mr. Thornton, I advise you not to interfere. Obstructing a court order is a serious offense. So is kidnapping a child from her mother. It's not kidnapping when the court has granted custody. A court order ain't worth the paper it's printed on if it's based on lies. And what lies would those be? The lie that Clara Sullivan is unfit. The lie that she's a danger to her own daughter. The lie that some rich man in Boston, who ain't spoken to his family in 15 years, suddenly cares about anything other than money. Ashworth's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. You're making serious accusations. I'm stating facts. Percival Sullivan disowned his son for marrying Clara. Didn't send a word of condolence when Thomas died. Didn't offer help when his granddaughter was left orphaned and destitute. Now, suddenly, he wants custody. Caleb shook his head. That ain't love. That's greed. My client's motivations are not your concern. They are when he's trying to steal a child. Stealing? Ashworth's voice went cold. I'm not the one who took this child and hid her in the wilderness. I'm not the one who kept her from her rightful family. I'm not the one who... I'd like to hear what Judge Whitfield has to say about all this. The voice came from the top of the stairs. An older man stood there. Iron gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He descended slowly, his gaze moving between the faces in the lobby. Judge Whitfield. Ashworth's voice was suddenly smooth again. I was just explaining the situation to these people. I heard. The walls in this building ain't thick. Whitfield's eyes found Caleb. Caleb Thornton. Been a while. Yes, sir. You're looking well. Better than when I saw you last. Got reason to, sir. Whitfield's gaze shifted to Clara, then to Rosie, who was pressed against her mother's side. Something in his expression softened. This the woman everyone's been talking about. The one who nearly died in the blizzard. Yes, sir. Clara Sullivan, and her daughter Rosie. Rosie. The judge crouched down slowly, getting himself on the child's level. That's a pretty name. Thank you, sir. Mama picked it because she loves roses. She says they're beautiful and strong at the same time. That's so. Whitfield smiled slightly. Sounds like your mama knows what she's talking about. She does. She's the smartest person in the world. Rosie, Clara murmured. It's true, Mama. Whitfield straightened his expression, growing serious. Mr. Ashworth, you told me the mother was unstable. dangerous, a threat to the child's welfare. I have documentation. You have papers. That ain't the same thing. Whitfield's voice hardened. What I see is a mother holding her daughter's hand, a child who clearly loves her mother, and a man, he nodded at Caleb, who I've known for years vouching for both of them. Your honor with respect personal acquaintance doesn't constitute evidence. Neither does paperwork from 1,000 miles away. I signed that custody order based on what you told me. Now I'm hearing a different story. Whitfield gestured toward the stairs. All of you, my chambers, we're going to sort this out properly. Ashworth's face went tight, but he nodded. Of course, Your Honor. They followed the judge up the stairs. Caleb kept himself between Ashworth and Clara, very aware of the tension radiating from the lawyer. Men like that didn't like being challenged. They liked control. They liked winning. Well, he was about to learn that not everything could be bought. The judge's chambers were lined with law books, dominated by a massive desk. Whitfield settled into his chair and gestured for everyone else to sit. Caleb positioned himself close to the door just in case. Now then, Mrs. Sullivan, I want to hear your side of this. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Clara took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady. My husband Thomas was killed 3 weeks ago. Bandits attacked us on the road to California. They shot him, took everything we had, and left me and Rosie to die in the desert. And yet you survived. Barely. I was injured in the attack. I tried to stitch myself up, but infection set in. We walked for 2 days looking for help. Then the blizzard hit. That's when Mr. Thornton found you. Yes, sir. I was unconscious, dying probably. Rosie was... Clara's voice broke. Rosie was standing guard over me with a stick, trying to keep the wolves away. Whitfield's eyes moved to Rosie. Is that true, child? Yes, sir. Mama fell down and couldn't get back up. I tried to carry her, but she was too heavy, so I found a stick and I stayed with her. I wasn't going to let anything hurt her. Brave girl. Caleb says so too. He says I'm the bravest girl in all of Wyoming. Something flickered in Whitfield's expression. He looked at Caleb. You found them in the blizzard? Yes, sir. Heard the child screaming. Thought it was a hawk at first. Rode out to investigate and found them half frozen in the snow. And you brought them to your ranch? Only place I could. Storm was too bad to make it to town. Mrs. Sullivan was burning up with fever. I did what I could, but it took 3 days for the fever to break. Another week before she could stand on her own. So she's been at your ranch for how long now? 3 weeks, give or take. Ashworth leaned forward. 3 weeks living alone with a man who isn't her husband. Hardly the behavior of a respectable... There was a child present the entire time, Whitfield interrupted. And Mrs. Sullivan was gravely ill for much of it, unless you're suggesting Mr. Thornton should have left a dying woman in the snow to preserve her reputation. Ashworth's jaw tightened. I'm suggesting that her judgment is questionable at best. Her judgment is just fine. Caleb's voice came out harder than he intended. She made the choice to survive, to keep her daughter alive. Everything else she did because she had no other option. And what's your stake in this? Mr. Thornton, why are you so invested in this woman's welfare? The question hung in the air. Caleb felt Clara's eyes on him. Rosie's. The judge's. Because someone should be, he said finally. Because she's been through hell and back, and she don't deserve to have her daughter stolen by some rich man who never cared about her until she became useful. Ashworth's face reddened. I resent that characterization. Resent it all you want. Don't make it less true. Whitfield held up a hand. Enough, both of you. He turned to Ashworth. Mr. Ashworth, I've read your petition. I've seen your documentation. I understand your client's position, but I'm troubled by what I'm hearing today. Your Honor, I signed that custody order based on your representation that Mrs. Sullivan was unstable and the child was in danger. What I see before me is a mother who's clearly devoted to her daughter and a child who's clearly thriving. That don't match up with what you told me. The child is heir to a fortune. She deserves to be raised in circumstances befitting her station. Her station. Whitfield's voice went cold. She's 5 years old. Her station is wherever her mother is. Her grandfather. Her grandfather disowned her father, ignored her for her entire life. Now suddenly, he wants custody. Whitfield shook his head. Forgive me if I'm skeptical of his intentions. Ashworth's composure finally cracked. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The court order has been signed. The law is clear. I have the right to take that child. You have the right to petition the court, which you've done. And the court has the right to reconsider its decision based on new evidence, which I'm doing. Whitfield reached for the custody order on his desk. He looked at it for a long moment. Then, in a deliberate motion, he tore it in half. No! Ashworth surged to his feet. You can't do that. Just did. Whitfield's voice was calm. I'm vacating the custody order pending a full investigation. Mrs. Sullivan retains custody of her daughter. Clara let out a sob. Rosie threw her arms around her mother. This isn't over. Ashworth's face was twisted with fury. I'll appeal. I'll take this to the territorial court. The Sullivan family has resources you can't imagine. Then use them. But right now in my courtroom, in my jurisdiction, that child stays with her mother. Whitfield stood. Get out of my chambers, Mr. Ashworth, before I hold you in contempt. For a long moment, Ashworth didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Rosie with an intensity that made Caleb's blood run cold. Then he gathered his papers and stalked toward the door. He paused at the threshold. You've won nothing here, he said to Clara. This is a temporary setback. The Sullivan family will have their granddaughter, one way or another. He was gone before anyone could respond. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Rosie was crying too, her small arms wrapped around her mother's neck. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Thank you, Clara whispered. Your Honor, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Whitfield's expression was troubled. He wasn't bluffing. The Sullivan family has money and influence. They'll appeal. They'll keep coming. So what do we do? Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Caleb. You planning to marry this woman, Thornton? The question hit like a thunderbolt. Caleb's mouth opened, but no words came out. I ain't asking to be nosy, Whitfield continued. I'm asking because if you're planning to make this family legal adoption marriage, the whole thing, it would significantly strengthen Mrs. Sullivan's position. Your Honor, Clara started. A married woman with a stable home and a husband who can provide for her is a much harder target than a widow living in isolation. And if that husband legally adopted the child, the Sullivan family's claim would be substantially weakened. Clara was staring at the judge with wide eyes. Caleb felt frozen in place. I ain't suggesting you do anything you don't want to do, Whitfield said. But if you're already headed in that direction, doing it now, rather than later, might save you a whole lot of trouble. We haven't. Clara's voice cracked. We barely know each other. Sometimes barely is enough. Whitfield's expression softened. I've seen a lot of folks in my courtroom over the years. Seen what desperation looks like. Seen what love looks like too. What I saw walk into my chambers today. He shook his head. That wasn't desperation. That was something else entirely. Nobody spoke. The fire crackled in the small stove. Then Rosie's voice, small but clear. Mama, are you going to marry Caleb? Clara made a choked sound. Rosie, this isn't... We haven't... But he loves us, I can tell. And you love him too. You look at him like you used to look at Papa. Baby. And if you got married, he'd be my Papa for real. And then nobody could take me away. That's what the judge said, right? Caleb looked at Clara. Her eyes were full of tears, but something else was there too. Something that looked like hope. "Clara," he heard himself say. "Marry me." The words came out before he could stop them, before he could think about whether it was too soon, too crazy, too much. Clara stared at him. "Caleb, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know this ain't how it's supposed to happen." He took a step toward her. "But I also know I ain't felt alive in 8 years. Not until you and Rosie showed up. I know I'd fight the whole world to keep you safe. And I know I don't want to go back to being alone. You're asking me to marry you so I can keep my daughter. No, I'm asking you to marry me because I love you. The rest is just a bonus." Clara's breath caught. "You love me. I love you, Clara May Sullivan. I love your stubbornness and your strength and the way you look at your daughter like she's the whole world. I love that you survived things that would have broken most people. And I love that despite everything you still have room in your heart to trust again." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. "Caleb, say yes, Mama." Rosie was bouncing on her toes. "Say yes. Baby, this is a big decision. You love him, I know you do, and he loves us. What else matters?" Clara looked at her daughter, then at Caleb, then at Judge Whitfield, who was watching with an expression that might have been a smile. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Caleb's heart was pounding. "Yes, I'll marry you." Rosie let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the chambers. She threw herself at Caleb, and he caught her, lifting her high. "You're going to be my papa for real." "For real," Caleb managed. "Forever." He looked at Clara over Rosie's head. She was crying, but she was smiling too. The biggest, brightest smile he'd ever seen. "Well then," Whitfield said, "I reckon we've got a wedding to perform." Now, Clara's eyes went wide. "Here? Unless you'd rather wait for Mr. Ashworth to file his appeal." Clara looked at Caleb. He saw the question in her eyes. The uncertainty, the hope. "Now," he said firmly. "Right now." Whitfield nodded. "Mrs. Henderson," he called. "Fetch Pastor Williams and his wife. Tell them we've got a wedding that needs performing." The next 20 minutes were a blur. Pastor Williams arrived breathless and confused but willing. His wife served as witness. Judge Whitfield provided the legal framework. And just like that, in a small courthouse in Wyoming Territory, Caleb Thornton and Clara May Sullivan became husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," Pastor Williams said. Caleb cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her gently. She tasted like tears and hope, and something that felt like home. When they pulled apart, Rosie was bouncing between them. "Now the adoption," she demanded. "Make it official." Whitfield had already pulled out the paperwork. "Caleb Thornton, do you swear to take legal responsibility for the minor child, Rosie Sullivan, to provide for her welfare, raise her as your own, and protect her rights and interests to the best of your ability?" "I do." "And Rosie Sullivan, do you consent to be adopted by Caleb Thornton, to take his name as your own and accept him as your legal father?" "I do." Rosie was practically vibrating. "I do, I do, I do." Whitfield signed the papers with a flourish. "Then it's done. Rosie Sullivan is now Rosie Thornton. The adoption is final and binding." "Papa!" Rosie threw herself at Caleb. "You're my papa now, for real and forever." Caleb held her tight, his eyes stinging. "For real and forever, kid." Clara wrapped her arms around both of them, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The danger, the uncertainty, the threat still looming on the horizon. For this one perfect moment, they were just a family. "One more thing," Whitfield said quietly, pulling Caleb aside while Clara and Rosie embraced. "Ashworth wasn't bluffing. The Sullivan family will appeal. They'll try every legal avenue they can. Let them try. I'm serious, Thornton. These aren't people who lose gracefully. They'll come at you with everything they have. Then I'll fight them with everything I have. Whitfield studied his face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I believe you will. And for what it's worth. His expression softened. I'm glad to see you living again. Eleanor would have wanted that. The mention of his first wife should have hurt, should have filled him with guilt. Instead, Caleb felt only peace. She would have loved them, he said quietly. Clara and Rosie. She would have loved them. I reckon she would. Whitfield clapped him on the shoulder. Now get your family home, Thornton. The storm's past. Time to start rebuilding. They walked out of the courthouse as a family, husband, wife, and daughter. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the snow-covered street in shades of gold. Where do we go now, Papa? Rosie asked, her hand firmly in Caleb's. Home, he said. We go home. Clara's fingers intertwined with his. Together. Together? Caleb agreed. And somewhere in Boston, Victor Ashworth was already planning his next move. The ride home felt different. Rosie sat between them on the wagon seat, chattering about everything and nothing. What she'd have for dinner. What she'd name the new calf in the barn. How she wanted to paint her bedroom yellow like sunshine. Papa, can we get a dog? A real big one that can protect us from wolves? We'll see. That means yes, right? Mama always says we'll see when she means yes. Clara laughed. The sound was lighter than Caleb had ever heard it, like something had finally loosened in her chest. It means we'll see, Clara said, which sometimes means yes and sometimes means no. But this time it means yes. Rosie looked up at Caleb with those huge dark eyes. Right, Papa? You're gonna be trouble, ain't you? Mama says I'm a blessing. Your mama's got a generous definition of blessing. Clara swatted his arm. Don't encourage her. Too late, she's already encouraged. They were still laughing when they crested the rise that brought the ranch into view. Caleb pulled the horses to a stop, something cold settling in his gut. There were riders in his yard. 3 of them. And they weren't neighbors. Clara, take Rosie and get behind the wagon. Caleb, now. His voice left no room for argument. Clara grabbed Rosie and scrambled down, pulling the child behind the wagon bed. Caleb reached for his rifle. The riders turned as he approached. 2 of them were strangers, hired guns from the look of them. Hard-faced men with pistols on their hips and nothing in their eyes. The third was Victor Ashworth. Mr. Thornton. Ashworth's voice was smooth as ever. We need to talk. Thought the judge made things clear. You got no business here. The judge made a temporary ruling, one that will be overturned within the week. I've already filed the appeal. Then file your appeal, but get off my land. I'm afraid I can't do that. Ashworth dismounted slowly. You see, I've received new information. Information that changes everything. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. What information? Ashworth reached into his coat. The hired gun's hands went to their weapons. Caleb's rifle came up. Easy. Ashworth raised one hand, while the other slowly withdrew a folded paper. Just documents, nothing dangerous. He unfolded the paper with deliberate care. This is a copy of Thomas Sullivan's will, executed 3 months before his death. Thomas didn't have a will. Clara would have known. Would she? Perhaps Thomas didn't tell her everything? Ashworth's smile was ice cold. According to this document, Thomas Sullivan left his entire estate such as it was in trust for his daughter, with one important provision. What provision? In the event of his death, guardianship of the child was to pass to his father, Percival Sullivan, not his wife. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. That's a lie, she said, stepping out from behind the wagon. Thomas would never, he hated his father. He wouldn't have. I have the document right here, Mrs. Sullivan. Notarized and witnessed. Perfectly legal. Ashworth held it up. Thomas knew his father's resources could provide for Rosie in ways he never could. He wanted what was best for his daughter. He wanted me to raise her. Perhaps, but he also wanted her to have every advantage, and he knew you couldn't provide that. Ashworth's voice dripped with false sympathy. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan, truly, but the law is clear. Percival Sullivan is Rosie's legal guardian. Your marriage to Mr. Thornton doesn't change that. Clara was shaking. Caleb stepped between her and Ashworth. That document is fake. I assure you it's quite genuine. Then you won't mind if Judge Whitfield takes a look at it. Something flickered in Ashworth's eyes, just for a moment. Then the smooth mask was back. Of course not. I'll be presenting it to the territorial court tomorrow, along with my appeal. He tucked the paper back into his coat. But I thought you should know what you're up against. This isn't a battle you can win, Mr. Thornton, not against the Sullivan family. We'll see about that. Yes, we will. Ashworth mounted his horse. You have until the end of the week to surrender the child voluntarily. After that, the court will issue a writ of custody, and I'll return with the sheriff. It would be better for everyone, especially Rosie, if this could be resolved peacefully. Get off my land. Ashworth smiled that cold, empty smile. Enjoy your family while you can, Mr. Thornton. It won't last. He rode away, the hired guns following. Caleb watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. Then Clara collapsed against him. That will is fake, she sobbed. Thomas would never. He loved me. He trusted me. He wouldn't have given Rosie to his father. I know. But they have documents. They have lawyers. They have lies. That's all. How do you know? Caleb pulled back and looked into her eyes. Because I know you. And I know what kind of man would marry you. Thomas Sullivan trusted you with his daughter. That's all I need to know. But the court will see through it. We'll get our own lawyer. We'll fight this. With what money? We have nothing, Caleb, nothing. We have the truth, and we have each other. Clara's face crumpled. I can't lose her. I can't. She's everything. You ain't gonna lose her. Caleb's voice was fierce. I made you a promise, and I don't break my promises. Papa. Rosie's small voice came from behind the wagon. What's happening? Why was that bad man here? Caleb released Clara and went to his daughter. His daughter. The word still felt new, precious. Nothing to worry about, kid. Just some folks who don't know when to quit. Are they going to try to take me away? They're going to try, but they ain't gonna succeed. Promise? Promise. Rosie studied his face with those huge, solemn eyes. Then she nodded. Okay, I believe you. Such simple faith, such absolute trust. It terrified him almost as much as it strengthened him. That night, after Rosie was asleep, Caleb and Clara sat at the table in the lamplight. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The will could be real, Clara said finally. Her voice was hollow, empty. Thomas was always trying to protect us, always planning for the worst. Maybe he thought his father could provide things I couldn't. You don't believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. She pressed her hands to her face. Everything I thought I knew about my husband, about our life together. What if I was wrong? What if he didn't trust me? Clara, look at me. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. Thomas married you against his father's wishes. He gave up a fortune to be with you. He spent 15 years building a life with you, raising a daughter with you. Does that sound like a man who didn't trust you? Then why would he write that will? He didn't. Ashworth is lying. You don't know that. I know men like Ashworth. I fought beside them in the war, Men who smile while they're stabbing you in the back. Men who forge documents and bribe witnesses and do whatever it takes to win. Caleb's voice hardened. That will is fake, and we're going to prove it. How? The original document would have been filed somewhere, notarized, witnessed. If Thomas really wrote a will 3 months before he died, there's got to be a record of it somewhere. In Ohio. That's where we lived. Then we'll write to Ohio. We'll find the notary. We'll find the witnesses. We'll prove Ashworth is a liar. That could take months. Then we'll fight for months. Clara stared at him. Why are you doing this? You could walk away. You could... I could nothing. Caleb reached across the table and took her hands. You're my wife. Rosie's my daughter. This is my family. And I don't give up on family. Fresh tears spilled down Clara's face. I don't deserve you. That's where you're wrong. He squeezed her hands. Now we need to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we start fighting back. Morning came cold and gray. Caleb was up before dawn writing letters by lamplight. One to the county records office in Ohio. One to the notary whose name had been on Ashworth's document. One to a lawyer in Cheyenne whose name he'd gotten from Judge Whitfield. What are you doing? Clara appeared in the doorway wrapped in a blanket. Building our defense. She came to stand behind him, reading over his shoulder. You're requesting copies of all documents filed by Thomas Sullivan in the last year of his life. If that will exists, there'll be a record. If it doesn't, we'll have proof it was forged. Exactly. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she bent and pressed a kiss to the top of his head. I love you, Caleb Thornton. The words settled into him like warmth from a fire. Love you too, Clara Thornton. It's still strange. Hearing my new name? Good. Strange or bad strange? Good. Definitely good. Rosie emerged from the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Why is everyone awake? It's still dark outside. Early bird gets the worm, Caleb said. I told you I don't like worms. Then the early bird gets bacon. How's that? Rosie's face lit up. That's much better. The days settled into a rhythm. Caleb worked the ranch during the day, kept watch at night. Clara started teaching Rosie her letters properly, using a slate board they'd bought in town. Neighbors came by Zeke Harper and his wife Martha, the Williams family from the Valley Others, who'd heard what was happening and wanted to help. We're with you, Zeke said one evening, his hat in his hands. Whatever you need, the whole community's behind you. Appreciate that. Ashworth's been asking questions in town, trying to dig up dirt on you, on Clara, on anyone who might testify against you. What kind of dirt? Anything he can find. Your drinking after Eleanor died. Clara's financial situation before she came here. Even asked about Rosie, whether she seemed happy, healthy, well cared for. That man's got a lot of nerve. That man's got a lot of money, and money buys a lot of nerve. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The letters Caleb had sent produced replies, most of them unhelpful. The county records office had no will on file for Thomas Sullivan. The notary whose name appeared on Ashworth's document claimed he'd never heard of Thomas Sullivan. That's good, isn't it? Clara asked, reading the notary's letter. He says he never notarized any will. That proves it's fake. It proves he says it's fake. Ashworth will claim he was bribed, or that there's another notary with the same name. He'll twist it. So, we're back where we started. Not quite. Caleb held up another letter. This came today, from a lawyer in Boston. Clara's face went white. Boston. I wrote to someone, a man I knew in the war. He practices law now up in Massachusetts. I asked him to do some digging into the Sullivan family. What did he find? Caleb unfolded the letter and read aloud. The Sullivan family fortune is in serious trouble. Percival Sullivan made several bad investments in railroad stocks last year. He's facing bankruptcy unless he can secure new capital quickly. Clara's eyes widened. He needs money. He needs Rosie's inheritance. That's why he suddenly cares about a granddaughter he ignored for 5 years. But there is no inheritance. Thomas had nothing when he died. Thomas had nothing. But Thomas's mother, Percival's first wife, left a trust fund for any grandchildren. It was established before Percival disowned Thomas. He can't touch it directly, but if he has custody of Rosie, he controls the trust. Exactly. And according to my friend's letter, that trust is worth over $50,000. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. 50,000. Percival Sullivan doesn't want Rosie because he loves her. He wants her because she's his last chance to stay rich. The revelation changed everything. Caleb rode to town the next day and presented the information to Judge Whitfield. The judge listened carefully, his expression growing darker with each new detail. "This casts a very different light on things," he said when Caleb finished. "If Percival Sullivan's motive is financial, rather than paternal, it proves everything Ashworth said was a lie. It suggests it. Proving it is another matter." Whitfield leaned back in his chair. "Ashworth filed his appeal with the territorial court yesterday. The hearing is set for next week." "Next week?" "They're moving fast. Someone greased some wheels." "Sullivan money." "Most likely." Whitfield's expression was grave. "Caleb, I want to help you, but you need to understand what you're up against. The territorial court isn't like my courtroom. The judges there, some of them can be influenced. Some of them owe favors to men like Sullivan. You're saying we might lose. I'm saying it's possible. And if you lose, they take Rosie." "Yes." Caleb stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "There's got to be something else. Some other way to fight this." "There might be." Whitfield hesitated. "It's a long shot, and it's not exactly legal." "I'm listening." "The trust fund, the one established by Thomas's mother. If Rosie were to renounce her claim to it, she's 5 years old, she can't renounce anything." "No, but her legal guardian can, on her behalf." Caleb went still. "You're saying if I renounce the trust, Percival Sullivan loses his reason to fight. The money goes elsewhere, probably to charity based on the trust's provisions, and suddenly, a granddaughter he ignored for 5 years becomes worthless to him. But Rosie loses $50,000. She loses money she never knew existed, and she keeps her mother, her family, her home." Whitfield met Caleb's eyes. "It's not a perfect solution, but it might be the only one that works." Caleb was silent for a long moment. $50,000 was more money than he'd ever seen, more than he'd ever earn, enough to set Rosie up for life. But what was money worth if she lost everything else? "How do I do it?" "There's paperwork. You'd need to file a renunciation with the court. It would have to be done before the hearing. Once custody is decided, everything changes." "Get me the papers." That evening, Caleb told Clara everything. She listened in silence, her face unreadable. $50,000, she said when he finished. "That's her future, her security, her chance at what? Growing up in some cold mansion in Boston, never seeing you again, having a grandfather who only cares about her because of what she's worth." Caleb shook his head. "That ain't security. That's a prison." "But the money. The money don't mean nothing if she ain't happy, if she ain't loved." He took Clara's hands. "You and Rosie are the richest things I've ever known. I don't need Sullivan money. None of us do." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You'd really give up $50,000? "I'd give up a lot more than that. For Rosie. For both of you." Clara launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. He held her tight, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much. Love you too. Papa." Rosie's voice came from the doorway. "Why is Mama crying?" Caleb released Clara and turned to face his daughter. "She's crying because she's happy." "That don't make sense. Crying is for sad. Sometimes people cry when they're really, really happy. It's like the happiness is too big to hold inside, so it spills out." Rosie considered this. That's weird. Maybe, but it's true. Rosie walked over and wrapped her arms around both of them. Are we going to be okay? Really okay. Caleb looked at Clara over Rosie's head, saw the fear still lurking in her eyes, the uncertainty, the hope. Yeah, kid. We're gonna be okay. Promise. Promise. The hearing was set for Tuesday. They left for Cheyenne on Sunday, making the long journey by wagon. Rosie chattered the whole way, asking questions about everything they passed. What's that mountain called? How come that river is frozen? Do bears really sleep all winter? If we win, can we get a dog? Caleb answered each question patiently, grateful for the distraction. Clara sat beside him, her hand never leaving his. They arrived in Cheyenne Monday evening and found a small hotel near the courthouse. The city was bigger than anything Rosie had ever seen, and she pressed her face to the window, taking in the lights and bustle. It's so big, she breathed. How do people not get lost? They know where they're going. Do we know where we're going? Caleb looked at Clara. I think we do. That night after Rosie was asleep, Clara found Caleb on the hotel's small balcony. He was staring out at the dark streets below. You should be sleeping, she said. Can't. Mind won't stop running. What are you thinking about? Everything. Tomorrow. Ashworth. What happens if... He stopped. If we lose... Yeah. Clara moved to stand beside him. Then we run. Like you said. Canada, Mexico, somewhere they can't find us. That's no life for Rosie. Always looking over her shoulder. Always afraid. It's better than losing her entirely. Caleb turned to face her. I signed the renunciation papers this morning, filed them with the court. Clara's breath caught. So it's done. It's done. Rosie's claim to the trust is officially withdrawn. $50,000 gone. And if it doesn't work, if Sullivan still wants her, then we figure something else out. Caleb pulled her close. But I got a feeling it'll work. Men like Sullivan, they don't fight for things that don't pay. Take away the money, and suddenly his granddaughter ain't worth the trouble. I hope you're right. Me too. They stood together in the darkness, holding each other. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, they had this. And for now, that was enough. The courtroom was packed. Caleb hadn't expected so many people. But word had spread, apparently. A custody battle between a working-class family and one of the richest men in Boston made for good gossip. He sat at the defendant's table with Clara Rosie between them. Across the aisle, Victor Ashworth sat alone, papers spread before him. He looked confident, smug. Caleb wanted to knock that look right off his face. All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Sterling. The judge entered a heavy-set man with cold eyes and an impatient expression. Caleb's heart sank. This wasn't a man who looked inclined toward mercy. Be seated. Let's get on with it. Ashworth presented his case first. The will, the custody petition, the claim that Clara was unfit, unstable, living in poverty with a man of questionable character. Mrs. Sullivan, excuse me, Mrs. Thornton has repeatedly evaded legal authorities. She fled Ohio with the child denying her grandfather access. She's been living in isolation with a stranger exposing the child to God knows what influences. Objection, Caleb said, rising. That ain't... You'll have your turn, Mr. Thornton. The judge's voice was sharp. Sit down. Caleb sat. Clara's hand found his under the table and squeezed. Ashworth continued for another 20 minutes. Each word was designed to paint Clara as unstable, Caleb as unsuitable, their marriage as a desperate ploy to avoid legal consequences. Finally, it was their turn. Caleb stood slowly. He wasn't a lawyer, didn't have fancy words or legal training, but he had the truth. Your Honor, everything Mr. Ashworth just said is a lie. A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thornton. It's the truth. That will is fake. Percival Sullivan never cared about his granddaughter until he needed her money. And Mr. Ashworth has been trying to steal a child from her mother for no reason other than greed. You have proof of these claims. I have this. Caleb held up the letter from the notary. This is from the man whose name appears on that will. He says he never notarized any document for Thomas Sullivan. He's never even heard the name. Ashworth was on his feet. That letter could be forged. And I have this. Caleb held up another paper. A letter from a lawyer in Boston confirming that Percival Sullivan is facing bankruptcy. He needs his granddaughter's trust fund to stay afloat. That's the only reason he suddenly cares about a child he ignored for 5 years. The murmur in the courtroom grew louder. The judge banged his gavel. Order, order in the court. Your Honor. Ashworth's voice was tight. Sit down, Mr. Ashworth. The judge's eyes were fixed on Caleb. Continue, Mr. Thornton. There's one more thing. Caleb pulled out the renunciation papers. Yesterday, I filed these documents with this court. As Rosie's legal guardian, I've formally renounced her claim to the Sullivan Family Trust. $50,000 gone. Donated to charity. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ashworth's face went white. What this means, Caleb continued, is that there's no more money, no more trust fund, no more reason for Percival Sullivan to want custody, unless he genuinely loves his granddaughter and wants what's best for her. He turned to face Ashworth directly. So let me ask you, Mr. Ashworth, does your client still want custody, now that there's nothing to gain from it? Ashworth's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the judge, to the crowd, back to Caleb. I'll need to consult with my client. Your client is in Boston, 2,000 miles away. Either he wants this child or he doesn't. Caleb's voice hardened. Which is it? The courtroom went silent. Every eye was on Ashworth. And in that silence, something shifted. Something broke. The Sullivan family. Ashworth's voice faltered. The Sullivan family will need to reconsider its position. Another gasp. The judge leaned forward. Are you withdrawing your petition, Mr. Ashworth? A long, terrible pause. Yes, Your Honor. The petition is withdrawn. The courtroom erupted. Caleb barely heard the chaos around him. He turned to Clara, who was crying, laughing, pulling him and Rosie into her arms all at once. We won, she sobbed. Caleb, we won. We won, Mama. Rosie was bouncing, her arms wrapped around both of them. We won. We won. We won. The judge was banging his gavel, calling for order. Ashworth was gathering his papers with shaking hands, his face the color of ash. But Caleb wasn't paying attention to any of it. He was holding his family, his wife, his daughter, and nothing else mattered. The ride home from Cheyenne took 3 days. 3 days of laughter. 3 days of Rosie's endless questions. 3 days of Clara's hand in his, their fingers intertwined like they'd always belonged that way. Papa, when we get home, can I help you with the horses? You can help with whatever you want, kid. Even the fence fixing. You said fence fixing was dangerous. Did I say that? You said I was too little. But I'm bigger now. I'm almost 6. Almost 6 is still pretty little. It's bigger than 5. Caleb looked at Clara, who was trying not to laugh. She's got you there, Clara said. She's got me everywhere. Kid argues like a lawyer. Don't insult me, Papa. Rosie crossed her arms. Lawyers are mean, like that Ashworth man. Not all lawyers are mean, baby, Clara said gently. The ones I've met are. Fair point. They crested the final ridge just as the sun was setting. The ranch spread out below them, smoke rising from the cabin chimney. Someone had been keeping the fire going. Zeke, Caleb said, must have been checking on the place. Good neighbors are worth their weight in gold. These neighbors are worth more than that. As they pulled into the yard, the cabin door opened. But it wasn't Zeke who stepped out. It was a stranger. An old man, thin and gray, dressed in clothes that cost more than the cabin itself. His face was lined with age and something else. Something that looked almost like grief. Caleb reached for his rifle. "Who the hell are you?" The old man raised his hand slowly. "Please. I'm not here to cause trouble." "I asked who you are." "My name is Percival Sullivan." Clara made a sound like she'd been struck. Her arms wrapped around Rosie, pulling the child close. "Get off my property," Caleb said, his voice deadly quiet. "I understand your anger. I do. But please, I came alone. No lawyers. No hired men. Just me." Percival's voice cracked. "I came to see my granddaughter. Just once. Before I die. You think you can just show up here after everything you've done?" "No, I don't think that. I know I have no right. No right at all." Percival's eyes found Rosie, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "She looks like Thomas. Around the eyes. The shape of her face." "Don't you talk about Thomas?" Clara said, her voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare! You threw him away. You treated him like he was nothing." "I know. He died thinking his father hated him. I know." Percival's voice broke completely. "I know what I did. I know what I lost. And I know I can never make it right." A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. "But I had to see her. Just once. I had to see what my son left behind." Silence. Heavy and terrible. Rosie tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Mama, is that my other grandpa, Papa Thomas's papa?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Yes, baby." "He looks sad." "He should be sad. He did bad things." "What kind of bad things?" "He hurt your papa. Before you were born. He hurt him very much." Rosie studied the old man with those huge, solemn eyes. "Did you say sorry?" Percival flinched like she'd slapped him. "I'm trying to. I don't know how." "Saying sorry is easy. You just say the words and mean them." Rosie's voice was matter of fact. "Mama taught me that. When you hurt someone, you say sorry, and you try to do better." "Rosie," Clara started. "It's true, Mama. That's what you said when I broke Mrs. Harper's teacup. You said saying sorry was the first step." Percival sank onto the porch step like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. "She's right. She's absolutely right." He looked up at Clara with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for disowning Thomas, for ignoring you both for 15 years, for trying to take Rosie away from you. For all of it, I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix anything," Clara said coldly. "No, it doesn't. But it's all I have left." Caleb kept his rifle ready, watching the old man's every movement. This could be a trick, another scheme, another way to get close to Rosie. But something about Percival Sullivan's face made him hesitate. The man looked broken, genuinely, completely broken. "How'd you find us?" Caleb asked. "I was in Cheyenne. For the hearing. I saw—" Percival's voice caught. "I saw you stand up for my granddaughter. Saw you give up $50,000 to protect her. Saw a man who barely knew her fight harder for her than I ever did. She's my daughter now. I know, and I'm glad." Percival wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. Thomas would have been glad too. He always wanted Rosie to have a good father. Someone who would protect her, love her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone better than me." Clara's expression flickered. Just for a moment, something like understanding crossed her face. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why did you disown him? He was your son." "Because I was proud, stupid and proud. I had plans for Thomas. Great plans. Business connections, a suitable marriage, the continuation of the Sullivan name. And when he chose you—" Percival shook his head. "I couldn't see past my own disappointment, my own wounded pride. I told myself he'd come crawling back. that he'd realize his mistake and beg forgiveness. But he didn't. No, he didn't. He built a life with you instead. A real life. With love and laughter and a daughter who looks at the world with his eyes. Percival's voice broke again. And I missed all of it, every moment. Because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. You tried to take Rosie from me. You hired that lawyer. I know. Percival buried his face in his hands. I was desperate. The business was failing and I thought if I could just control the trust fund, but that wasn't really it. Not really. Then what was it? Percival looked up, his face ravaged with grief. I wanted her because she was all I had left of Thomas. The only piece of my son that still existed in this world. And I thought if I could have her, maybe I could fix what I'd broken. Maybe I could pretend the last 15 years never happened. That's not how it works. I know that now. Watching you in that courtroom, watching you fight for her, I realized something. Percival's eyes found Caleb. You're her father now, not me, not even Thomas, God rest him. You're the one she runs to. You're the one who'll teach her to ride and read and face the world. And that's exactly how it should be. Rosie had been listening quietly. Now she stepped forward, pulling free of Clara's grip. Rosie, wait. But the child walked right up to Percival Sullivan and stood before him, her small face serious. You hurt my Papa Thomas, and you hurt my mama, and you tried to take me away. Yes, I did. That was very bad. I know. Rosie studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his wrinkled hand in her small one. But you said sorry, and you meant it, I can tell. She looked back at Clara and Caleb. Mama says we should give people chances, even when they don't deserve it, because that's how people get better. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Rosie, baby. I'm not saying I forgive him. Not yet. Forgiveness takes time. Rosie's voice was heartbreakingly wise. But I'm saying maybe we don't have to hate him forever. Maybe he can try to do better, like you said. Percival stared at his granddaughter like she was a miracle, which in a way she was. How did you get so wise? He whispered. I have a good mama. And now I have a good papa too. Rosie squeezed his hand once, then released it. You can visit sometimes, if Mama and Papa say it's okay. But you can't try to take me away anymore. And you have to be nice. I promise. And you have to bring presents. That's what grandpas do. Despite everything, a laugh escaped Percival. A genuine laugh rusty from disuse. I can do that. Rosie nodded solemnly like they'd just concluded important business. Then she turned and walked back to Caleb, taking his hand. Can he stay for dinner, Papa? Just this once, so he can see that we're a real family, and he doesn't have to worry. Caleb looked at Clara. Her face was a battlefield of emotions, anger and grief, and something that might have been the beginning of acceptance. It's your call, he said quietly. He's your family. Or he was. Clara was silent for a long moment. Then she let out a breath that seemed to carry years of pain with it. One dinner, that's all. And if you ever try anything again, I won't. Percival rose slowly to his feet. I swear on Thomas's grave, I won't. The dinner was awkward, stilted, full of long silences and careful words. But it was also something else. Something that felt almost like healing. Percival asked about Thomas, about their life together, about the man his son had become during the years they'd been estranged. And Clara slowly began to tell him about how Thomas worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, how he sang off-key, but with such joy that no one minded, how he'd stayed up all night when Rosie had croup walking her back and forth until the sun came up. He was a good man, Clara said. The best man I ever knew. I wish I'd seen it. Percival's voice was thick with regret. I wish I'd been there. You can't go back. None of us can. No, but maybe I can do better going forward." Clara exchanged a look with Caleb. He nodded slightly. "We'll see," she said. "One step at a time." Percival left the next morning. He shook Caleb's hand at the door, his grip surprisingly strong. "Take care of them. That's my job." "I know. I'm glad of it." Percival hesitated. "There's something I need to tell you. The trust fund, the one you renounced, I've been thinking about it. What happens to the money now?" "It goes to charity. That's what the documents said." "That's what they said. But I have influence with the trustees. I could direct where the money goes." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at?" "There's a school in your town, the one Clara's been talking about starting. If the money were directed there for a building, for books, for scholarships, for children who couldn't otherwise afford an education." "You want to donate the money to Clara's school?" "I want to do something good with my son's legacy. And I can't think of anything better than helping his wife teach other children." Percival's voice was soft. "Would you let me do that? Would you let me try to make amends?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he called over his shoulder. "Clara, come here a minute." She appeared in the doorway, Rosie close behind. "Mr. Sullivan has a proposition." Percival explained again, watching Clara's face carefully. When he finished, she was staring at him with an expression of disbelief. "You want to fund my school?" "I want to fund Thomas's legacy. And you are his legacy. You and Rosie and everything you build together." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes, please. Let me do this one good thing." Clara looked at Caleb. He shrugged. "Your call." She turned back to Percival. "On one condition." "Anything." "We name it after Thomas. The Sullivan School. So everyone knows where it came from." Percival's eyes filled with tears. "I would like that very much." And just like that, something shifted. Some weight lifted from all of them. The past couldn't be erased, but maybe, just maybe, it could be transformed into something better. The months passed quickly after that. Spring came to Wyoming, melting the snow and turning the world green. Caleb expanded the cabin, adding 2 new rooms, one for Rosie with the east-facing window he'd promised, and one for the baby that Clara had just discovered was on the way. "A baby!" Rosie had shrieked when they told her. "A real baby, like a tiny person." "Exactly like a tiny person. Will it be a boy or a girl? We don't know yet. I hope it's a girl. Boys are weird." Rosie paused. "Except you, Papa. You're not weird." "Thanks, kid, I think." The school opened in June. A proper building paid for by the Sullivan Trust, with room for 30 students, and a library that Clara was slowly filling with books. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic, and somehow made all of it seem like an adventure. "Mrs. Thornton is the best teacher," the children would say, and Rosie would beam with pride. "That's my mama." Zeke and Martha had another baby, their 6th, and Rosie appointed herself chief babysitter. "I'm practicing," she explained seriously, "for when my brother or sister comes. What if the baby doesn't want to be practiced on? Then I'll practice on the chickens. Pepper's almost as fussy as a baby anyway." Summer stretched long and golden. Caleb taught Rosie to ride properly, not just sitting in front of him, but on her own horse, a gentle mare named Buttercup. She took to it like she'd been born in the saddle. "I'm a real cowgirl now, Papa." "You've always been a real cowgirl. Now you're just a cowgirl who can ride." The baby came in October, a boy with Caleb's gray eyes and Clara's auburn hair. They named him Thomas after the man who'd loved them first. "He's so small," Rosie whispered, peering into the cradle. "Was I this small? Even smaller." "Wow." She reached out and touched his tiny hand. "Hi, Thomas. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. How to ride horses and read books and feed the chickens. And I'll protect you from bad men, just like Papa protected me and Mama." Caleb watched from the doorway, his chest tight with emotion. A year ago, he'd been alone in this cabin, convinced he'd never feel anything again. Now he had a wife, a daughter, and a son. A family. How had he gotten so lucky? Clara caught his eye and smiled. She was tired, still recovering from the birth, but there was a peace in her face that hadn't been there when he'd first met her. The hunted look was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something that looked a lot like joy. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That I don't deserve any of this." "Caleb, I know. You're going to tell me I'm wrong." "You are wrong. You deserve everything." Clara reached out her hand. "Come here." He crossed to the bed and sat beside her, careful not to jostle the sleeping infant in her arms. "Look at what we built," Clara whispered. "Look at this family. Our family. You made this possible, Caleb. You saved us." "You saved me first. Then we saved each other. That's what love does." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Clara Thornton." "I love you too. Now go get some sleep. Thomas is going to be awake in 2 hours wanting food, and you're on baby duty." "Me. You. Rosie and I are exhausted. It's your turn." Caleb looked at his tiny son, already stirring in his sleep. "I don't know anything about babies." "Neither did I until I had Rosie. You'll figure it out." He did figure it out. Not perfectly. There were midnight feedings that went wrong, and diaper changes that ended in disaster, but he figured it out. Just like he'd figured out everything else since that day in the blizzard, when a little girl's scream had changed his life. Percival visited twice that first year. He came bearing gifts as promised: toys for Rosie, books for Clara, practical tools for Caleb, and endless adoration for baby Thomas. "He has his father's nose," Percival said, gazing at the infant with something like wonder, "and his grandmother's mouth. My Eleanor Thomas's mother, she had a mouth like that." "Tell me about her," Clara said. So Percival did. He told them about Eleanor, a different Eleanor than Caleb's, a woman who'd loved flowers and music and their son with all her heart. He told them about Thomas as a baby, as a boy, as a young man full of dreams and determination. He told them about the regrets that had haunted him every day since the estrangement. "I wasted so much time," he said. "So many years I can never get back." "Then don't waste any more," Clara replied. He didn't. He came to every birthday, every holiday, every school performance. He watched Rosie grow from a fierce little warrior into a confident young girl. He watched Thomas take his first steps, speak, his first words become the spitting image of his namesake. And slowly, painfully, he became part of the family he'd nearly destroyed. The years passed, good years full of hard work and small joys. Caleb's ranch prospered. Clara's school grew. Rosie turned 10, then 12, then 15, a young woman now with her mother's intelligence and her father's quiet strength. "Papa," she said one evening, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it taking us in?" Caleb looked at his daughter, because that's what she was, in every way that mattered, and felt his heart swell. "Not for a single second. Even when I was difficult." "You're still difficult. It's part of your charm." Rosie laughed. "Mama says I get it from you." "Your mama's a troublemaker." "She says that about you too." Caleb smiled. "Sounds about right." Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I remember it, you know. The blizzard. The day you found us. You were 5. Most people don't remember anything from that young. I remember everything. The cold, the fear, standing over Mama with that stick, sure I was going to die but refusing to leave her." Rosie's voice softened, and then I heard hoofbeats. And you were there, this stranger on a horse looking at me like I was the bravest thing he'd ever seen. You were. You still are. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave. Rosie turned to face him fully. I never thanked you properly. For that day. For everything after. You didn't have to save us. You didn't have to keep us. You could have dropped us at the nearest town and ridden away. No, I couldn't have. Why not? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, remembering. The scream, the snow, the little girl with the stick and the fierce, frightened eyes. Because you reminded me what I'd forgotten, he said finally. That life was worth living. That family was worth fighting for. That love was worth the risk. He reached out and squeezed her hand. You and your mama, you saved me, Rosie, long before I saved you. Rosie's eyes glistened with tears. I love you, Papa. Love you too, kid. Always have, always will. The anniversary dinner was Clara's idea. 15 years since the blizzard. 15 years since a dying woman and her daughter had appeared in Caleb's life and changed everything. The whole community came. Zeke and Martha with their 6 children, well 5 now. The oldest had married and moved away. The Williams family, the Harpers, dozens of families whose children had passed through Clara's school. And Percival, of course. Older now, frailer, but still determined to be present for every important moment. 15 years, he said, raising his glass. 15 years since my son's wife and daughter found a home with a stranger in a blizzard. 15 years since a man I'd never met gave up everything to protect a family that wasn't his. He looked at Caleb with eyes full of emotion. I've made many mistakes in my life, but the worst one was not seeing sooner what you saw from the first moment. That family isn't about blood or money or name. It's about love. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other every single day. He raised his glass higher. To Caleb and Clara, to Rosie and Thomas, to family. To family, the crowd echoed. Caleb looked around at the faces of the people who'd become his community. At Rosie, now taller than her mother, standing with a young man she'd been quietly courting. At Thomas, 13 and all legs, trying to sneak an extra piece of cake. At Clara, more beautiful now than the day he'd met her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still shining. Speech, someone called. Give us a speech, Caleb. He shook his head. I ain't much for speeches. Come on, Papa. Rosie grinned. Just a few words. All right, all right. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of all those years in his bones. I ain't gonna talk long because you all know I ain't good with words. But there's something I want to say. Something I've been thinking about for 15 years. He looked at Clara, his heart full. When I found them in that blizzard, I thought I was saving 2 strangers. Thought I was just doing what any decent person would do. But the truth is, they saved me. I'd been dead inside for 8 years. Walking around, working, breathing, but not really living. And then this little girl with a stick and a scream that could wake the dead showed me what courage looked like. And her mama showed me what love looked like. And together, they showed me what family meant. His voice roughened with emotion. I spent 8 years being afraid. Afraid to love, afraid to lose, afraid to let anyone in. And then Clara said yes to a proposal I made in a courthouse while lawyers were trying to steal her daughter. And Rosie called me Papa for the first time. And suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore, because I'd found something worth being brave for. He raised his glass. To second chances, to found families, to the courage to love even when it's hard, and to the little girl who changed everything because she wouldn't let go of a stick. To family, the crowd roared again. Later, after the guests had gone, Caleb sat on the porch with Clara. The night was quiet, full of stars. Inside, Thomas was already asleep. Rosie had gone walking with her young man, chaperoned at a respectful distance by Zeke's oldest daughter. 15 years, Clara said softly. Doesn't feel that long. Feels like yesterday. Feels like forever. Both at once. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you remember what you said to me that first night in the cabin when I asked why you were helping us? I said something about not being able to ride past. You said, Because someone should have helped them, and nobody did. Clara lifted her head to look at him. You were talking about Eleanor, about your first family. Yeah. I've thought about that a lot over the years. About how grief can become love again if you let it. About how the worst thing that ever happened to you led you to us. Funny how that works. Not funny, beautiful. Clara took his hand. Eleanor would be proud of you, Caleb, proud of the man you've become, the father you've become. Caleb was quiet for a moment. He still thought about Eleanor sometimes, still visited her grave on the hill behind the cabin, usually with Clara beside him. But the pain had softened over the years, transformed into something gentler. Gratitude, maybe. For the love they'd had, even if it was brief. I hope so, he said finally. I'd like to think she's watching over all of us. I'm sure she is. They sat in silence watching the stars. The wind whispered through the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Caleb, yeah, thank you for finding us, for saving us, for giving us a home. Thank you for letting me. Clara smiled and kissed his cheek. I love you, you stubborn old cowboy. Whoa. Love you too, you troublesome schoolteacher. They laughed together, the sound carrying into the night. 15 years of laughter. 15 years of tears and joy and hard work and love. And it was only the beginning. Inside the cabin hung above the fireplace was a sign that Rosie had painted years ago. Simple words on weathered wood, but they meant everything. 3 hearts, 1 home. Caleb looked at it every day. Every single day for 15 years, he'd looked at those words and remembered what they meant. That family wasn't about blood. It was about choice. It was about showing up day after day, year after year. It was about fighting for the people you loved even when the odds were against you. He'd learned that lesson in a blizzard from a 5-year-old girl with a stick and a scream that could wake the dead. And he'd spent every day since making sure she knew she'd been right to trust him. The years would keep passing. Rosie would marry her young man and have children of her own. Thomas would grow into a fine young man, then a good husband and father. Clara would teach 1,000 more students, shaping the next generation of Wyoming's citizens. Percival would pass peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92, surrounded by the family he'd almost lost and been blessed enough to reclaim. And Caleb would stand at the center of it all, watching his family grow and change and flourish. The broken man who'd thought he'd never feel anything again, now surrounded by more love than he'd ever dreamed possible. That was the miracle of it. That was the gift he'd been given on that frozen day 15 years ago when a little girl's scream had called him out of the blizzard and into a new life. He hadn't saved them. They had saved each other. And that was enough. That was everything. That was home.